And you're live.
Okay, we are here at House Education, May 2nd, 2025, continuing our discussion on H54, the phone-free schools bill. And we are fortunate to get more reports from the field as to how it's working, how that sort of idea works and lessons learned. And so we have Ryan Harity, superintendent from the Wales South Supervisory Union here to talk to us about their experience. And we are looking forward to your testimony. Ryan, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Ryan Harity. I'm the superintendent of Lamoille South, which includes the towns of Elmore, Morristown, and Stowe. Today, I'm providing testimony regarding House Bill 54, a proposal prohibiting cell phones and electronic devices in Vermont schools. I'm speaking today for two districts and on behalf of the Vermont Superintendents Association. Over the past year, our supervisory union has introduced a policy similar to what is being proposed. The policy prohibits cell phones and personal electronic devices from our schools during school hours and requires students to have the phones in their lockers or a secured location agreed to by the principal. This policy has been a resounding success, and in combination with other district-wide efforts, we have noted the following: improved academic performance, increased student engagement, reduced incidents of hazing, harassment, and bullying, high levels of employee retention and satisfaction, more socialization, and decreased student anxiety, less power struggles, and more focus on teaching and learning. Although I have a great deal to say on this topic, it may be more powerful for you to read the comments that were provided by our faculty and staff in a recent survey that I administered earlier this week. I have attached the documents to my testimony for your review. One perspective that I will share is from a conversation I had with a teacher earlier this week. I asked the high school teacher what her experience has been with the new policy. She started to tear up and she explained it has resulted in her loving her job again. She admitted that just a few years prior, she was wondering if she really wanted to stay in education. The pandemic was really hard, as we all know, and behavior, including cell phones, had become such an issue, it was taking the joy out of teaching. She said this year, she eagerly signed her contract and is looking forward to many years ahead. Of course, there are many factors that contribute to such a sense of pride and value in your work. However, if there is something we can do to support teachers and encourage more to stay in our classrooms, we should do it. The number one influence on student achievement is a teacher, and we can never forget that. To implement this policy, there were several critical steps that should be considered by any district moving forward. Survey families and faculty and staff to determine the level of stakeholder input or stakeholder support. Determine clear expectations and consequences. Keep those consistent throughout all schools and educate students early and often around the importance of why you're doing this. Provide detailed information to students and families with extensive research explaining why the district is adopting the policy. Ensure consistent implementation across all schools and leverage a team approach. And finally, survey families and employees and share the results before and after implementation. I thank you for this opportunity. Those are all things that we have done. I really encourage you to read the survey responses, and I'll tell you, this is just raw data. I took out one response only because it included reference to a specific employee, but it wasn't negative, it was positive, but I just took out the name. But other than that, this is 100% raw. So it tells you the good, it tells you the bad, it tells you, things that we see that we still need to work on and address in coming years. But I think it will give you just an accurate reflection of how it's working in our schools right now. I would consider this low-hanging fruit. I think it's something that everyone that we've seen, everyone has really appreciated it. At first, I said this was going to be a positive thing. This is going to make a big difference. But I've been overwhelmed by the impact that it's had on our schools, on our families, on our students. It's been nothing but positive.
Awesome. So your results and what you're telling us reflects what we heard from folks in Harwood as well. And first of all, is it at both of your high schools? Do you have it implemented?
Yeah, middle schools and high schools.
Yeah. One of the things we talk about is, how do we best remove, especially for the job satisfaction part of it, remove the burden of enforcement from teachers. How did you address that?
Yeah, so I think that came down to just clear consequences and teachers, what we had seen in the past and what I had seen as a teacher, as a principal, in different, different places. What we had seen is that when teachers all have different rules, it creates an environment that's really hard to enforce something. Because if a student goes from one classroom to the next classroom and this teacher is allowing it and this teacher is not allowing it, then that, potentially puts those teachers at odds. And so what this did is it basically gave all the teachers, they could just say, listen, it's not my choice. The choice is you can't do it. And these are the rules. If it happens once, your phone goes to the office and you get it at the end of the day. If it happens twice, your parent needs to come and pick up your phone. And if it happens 3 times, your parent needs to meet with the administration and make a plan for how we're going to manage the phone. I think we have probably 6 or 7 students that have reached that 3rd layer. And those students come in the morning and they give their phones in the front office and they stay in the office all day. And the students know. I mean, they know that it's something that they just can't control. But I think just the consistency of consequences and implementation was embedded in the policy so that it wasn't left to interpretation.
Did you ever spend any money?
No. Okay.
And what is the actual phone management that you guys do?
Yeah.
Leave it in your locker. Is that pretty much just what everybody does? There's no like collecting?
Yeah. I mean, it was, there's different ways that schools have approached it. Some have approached it with the under pouches or they collect phones in the morning. There's also some low cost options where people have, put them in like, bags or things like that. Our principals, what we did is we met last summer. We said, okay, we're going to implement this policy. And how will it work for our schools? And our principal said, we don't want to navigate the pouches. We don't want to do that. We also didn't have the money to spend on the pouches. So the principal said, I feel confident that if we just tell them they need to be in their lockers and we don't want to see them, period, then the students will make the right decisions. And if we see them, then we need to take action. And so I think it's eliminated the problems. Are there students that still have them in their backpacks or have them in their pockets? Of course, but those students know that they better not make a sound and they better not pull them out at any time. And that by itself is just, has alleviated the power struggle.
Rob and Beth?
Why? Why did you do it? What was the tipping point for you and your district?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something that it was a constant power struggle. And what we saw was certain students were really relying on the phone to navigate any sort of challenging situation that arose as far as maybe a difficult socialization process, or they were spending a lot of time on their phones. And we know these phones, these apps they're designed to be addictive. And so students just couldn't help it. And a lot of times, instead of having a conversation with each other at a table, they were pulling out their phones and they were all staring at their phones. And I remember last year thinking, how is this really going to work when we implement it? And what is the power struggle that we see from kids? What we learned, though, is that if kids know that no one else has access to the phones, then they're fine with it. If they know that someone else in this classroom might be able to access their phone, but I can't, and so there might be something happening online that I don't know about, and now I'm not included in this, this funny thing or this social thing that happened, that creates a lot of anxiety for kids. And that's when they're going to the bathroom, they're checking. But if they know nobody is on it, then I think they just relax. And the other big piece that really concerned me is that students were really limiting their willingness to take risks at certain times because they were worried that somebody would record them and post it on social media. And this teacher that I spoke to the other day is an excellent teacher and does a wonderful job. And she told me that happened to her last year, probably 4 or 5 times in her classes, that students had recorded something and posted it. And we had found out about it and we had addressed it. But still, students having to worry about that somebody's going to record you and post something online. This year, first day at People's Academy, we had a community meeting and one of the 9th grade students stood up and played a musical instrument to welcome the entire school back. And I was thinking at the time, there were 0 phones. There was, and I was just thinking, this moment, this student is only thinking about the moment. They're not thinking about somebody potentially capturing this, them making a mistake, that sort of thing. It was just, it was just real. It was authentic. It was wonderful. And I was like, wow, we made the right decision.
Two things, if it's okay. One specific to this. Have you considered or had discussions around any exceptions to cell phone use? Like in a classroom, if it was appropriate for some use, that there could be an exception made? Or for medical reasons or, so the exception is the cell phone piece. And the second one is, did you address just cell phones? Because part of our bill talks also about how schools can communicate via social media with
Yeah.
students.
Yeah, so we do allow exceptions. We have some students that have diabetes that have the phone that monitors their blood sugar, and
Yeah.
obviously we wouldn't, want to limit anything
Yeah.
like that. We have some students that use the phones for communication devices,
Mhm.
English learners, things like that, that is sometimes allowed. However, one thing that we realized when that question started coming up is that our Chromebooks, can handle most of those challenges. And so, one thing we said to parents was, with our middle school and our high schoolers, we said, hey, if you need to communicate something to your children, you can send them an email. You don't need to text them. And if it's immediate, call the school and we can handle it that way. But, one of the big pieces of pushback we got right away was, well, what if I need to contact my child right away? One of the, I think, most humorous things that happened was there was a student that needed to call their parent and used one of the landlines and finished the conversation and said, now what do I do with it? You hang it up, yeah. And it was,
Wow.
but that just told us, wow, this is, this is gonna be something positive.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
I noticed in your implementation steps, number one is survey families and faculty to determine the level of stakeholder support. And I'm curious, if you had received no support from families, would you have canned this idea?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we had about 80% of our families that said they were excited about it. And I think one of the worries that a lot of administrators or schools have is that parents and families are not going to be in support of it.
Mhm.
And when we got those numbers back, we said, wow, this is, it's essentially a mandate.
Yeah,
They want us to do it. I'm not sure what that statewide data would look like, but my assumption is that you probably have an overwhelming positive response to removing cell phones from the schools. I think most parents would like to see their child without the phone during the morning.
but if you didn't, are you saying with that number one that you should make sure you have the support, and if you don't do it?
I think we probably would have stepped back and said, why, what are the concerns and why are they feeling that way? And do we need to do some education around the impact that it's having? And do we need to,
Okay.
what steps should we take to really, share more of the research, to share our educator perspective? I think we'd probably not give up on it,
Mhm.
but I think we probably would recognize we have some work to do.
Yeah, in your recommendations, I just can't help but wonder, are we beyond this? Like, do we really need to talk about it anymore? But I guess it's important to get the buy-in and all of that. And some of these comments are actually very helpful. I believe the success we've experienced this year is several key factors: clearly communicated rules and expectations for the entire school prior to the year, data collection via surveys, and all staff applying the rules, expectations, and consequences consistently and fairly. Well, that's very key. But I just sort of wonder, like, wow. And maybe it's because we've been sitting in here hearing the stories day after day after day, where we have a little bit of an advantage. We probably do still need to go out and survey, or schools should go out and survey people to get buy-in, but I don't know, seems like the argument's over.
Yeah, I agree. I think to me, it's low-hanging fruit. I think every school should do it. And it's been such a positive experience. I feel like to not do it at this point is somewhat negligent. I mean, kids deserve that opportunity to not have that device impacting their ability to learn.
I can't think of it, we used to let kids age 16 and above smoke.
Yeah.
Any other questions about, how do you deal with peripheral things, earbuds, smartwatches, that sort of thing that might be connected?
No watches, no earbuds. Earbuds, you'll see in the survey, some staff members have requested that we re-examine the earbuds. So we'll be thinking about that. I'm not ready to do that yet. I think I have some concerns about, just allowing access to music all day and things like that if kids have them in. But, I understand they don't necessarily want to share community headphones all the time. So we're trying to think about what is the compromise there and how do we monitor it? But what we don't want to do is just add another thing to police.
And did you get involved at all? Well, I guess, is all communication between students and coaches and everybody all strictly email?
We have some apps, because we don't limit but if it's communication that students are expected to see during the day, then that would be done via email. But what we've done is made sure that any apps that athletes or anyone is expected to use can also be accessed through a Chromebook. So there's no requirement that a student would have to have a cell phone to be able to access any communication from the school.
And what policy do you have with, let's say, coaches or teachers or people who are running clubs? What do you tell them the rules are in terms of communicating with students?
Yeah, we tell them that all communication should be done on through a platform that allows access through a Chromebook. So that because before we did have some apps that required cell phone use, and so we made that transition.
So could a team, coach, club create a Facebook page and require the kids to communicate through the Facebook page? Because you can,
No, it's called Sports U. is
or
what we
like,
use.
or like Team Snap,
Yeah.
things like that. Okay, I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that, like, because we were not, like, I just want to see if it was a social media platform or just like a communication application.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, there are still some challenges with that because we have, athletes, let's say captain's practice, right? And the captain's practice is, we're going to use Snapchat to tell everyone that, what time the captain's practice is. That's a big problem that we're trying to figure out. And it's a hard one to solve because we don't want to have students required to be on these social media apps. At the same time, you have 90+% of students now that are only communicating via Snapchat. I think Snapchat is probably I think it's one of the more challenging and dangerous apps that we have out there that we're trying to figure out how to navigate.
That particular example you brought up, a captain's practice, that's not a school sanctioned practice.
kids.
Correct, yeah.
So that's their own, it's not the school telling them they have to communicate around that. They're just making those decisions themselves with each other, which is in their own purview.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Much more fun, unfortunately, but yes.
it's just hard because potentially if you're a parent that's saying this is an app that I don't want my child on, then you're potentially setting your child up to not get important information, which is, I wish if you could get rid of Snapchat, that would be wonderful. I'm not sure there's a bill for that, but that would be, don't tell all the students I said that.
You're on camera.
I know.
They're not watching.
I don't
I think
really
he knows
care. I don't really
that
care.
cat's out of the bag.
I'm pretty honest about it. I don't like that app at all.
When you say it has to be an app that is accessible with a school issued Chromebook.
Yeah.
Do those have like definitions? Representative Taylor, for example, said, let's make sure it's only something that can be printed, archived.
Monitored by the district.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those apps, we vet those apps and make sure that they're accessible. I'm not sure about Sports U as far as, but yeah, you could print it off and you could distribute it like that. If you had a student that didn't have any sort of technology access at all.
More along the lines of monitoring, really, because are my concerns.
Yeah, it's all easily monitored by the district.
And are fully archived. So you have
Yeah,
to go back,
archived.
see what happened here. All right, well, if you think of other sort of lessons learned or, we have our bill that we're working on. I think sort of like the put away the phones part is pretty straightforward and easy to do. But we're also delving into trying to limit what apps could be used for direct communication. And, we could do both. We could do just the putting away the cell phones. But anyway, do you have any further thoughts on that sort of direct communication part, or should we not get involved with how we handle social media at all? Certainly we welcome any further comments you might have.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take is to try to keep it simple. Because I think the more layers you add to it, the more complications you're gonna encounter. And I think the big one is to just get the phones out of the school during the school day to focus on teaching and learning. And that, to me, that's the big boulder to move. And if you can do that, I think it's a big win. But I think there also are really other important elements to that. And so if there's a couple that could be woven in that could, help with that. I think those apps, that app requirement, I don't think is a bad one. I think that's most schools, I think, would be really open to doing that. And so I think, but anything that's going to require potential major shift or an expense or puts a lot of additional burden on a teacher, I think is something that you really want to try to avoid. And that's my opinion.
Brady.
Do you have any exemptions or like following up on Kimberly's question, but academic, like a journalism class where they need to post articles somewhere or need to take photographs of artwork for a portfolio? Maybe you don't have a class set of cameras. Like, are there any sort of academic workarounds that are being used at all in any classes that you know of, or is it just a
We've
hard pass?
We've tried not to have a lot of exceptions for that in the classroom, because we just view it as a potential problem area for always making exceptions. And what we've done is we've purchased digital cameras and we've tried to do some other things like that, where there'll be devices that just stay in the classroom. But if it's something big that's happening, the principal still has the autonomy and the policy to make exceptions. And I think that's important.
Have you had a very particular issue, students who are enrolled in early college and need to access their CCV course through order enrollment, with two-factor authentication, when you need your phone for that?
Yeah, two-factor authentication has been a question. We haven't had that specific incident with something that would happen outside of school, but that would be something we would just make an exception for. And in those incidents, we leave the autonomy for the principal to make the decision.
Go ahead,
I have another
Beth.
question.
Emily?
So, because I haven't read it in detail, because we did have maybe a concern bell to bell at school, but what about if it's a field trip situation? You take your kids overnight to the Great Escape theme park, for example, and they have their phone with them then. Or have you not dealt with any of that yet?
No, we have dealt with that. We kind of said, the first thing we're gonna do is do bell to bell, no
On
phones
campus.
on campus.
Yeah.
And we have a field trip at seventh grade every year goes to Maine for a nature's classroom field trip. And so one of the questions was, so are we gonna do phones or not phones? Kids are gonna spend 5 hours on a bus, and we ended up allowing them. And I think that was, a decision we made. But at the elementary level, we've eliminated any of that. So no field trip, no phones in any elementary field trips, school sponsored field trips during the school day, no phones. Athletic events after school, we said, we're not gonna fight that battle. And, the bus ride home after school, we're not gonna fight that battle. It's not worth it. We also have a third party transportation company. And so to transfer seeing to a third party, we saw as problematic.
Emily?
So, it sounds like you've been really flexible in the way you've implemented this, and I think that's really key to buy-in, right? But I'm curious about your opinion about whether you've got a bell to bell, essentially, but you're not taking phones away from kids when they walk in the door. You're allowing that to happen. But in retrospect, after you've gone through this, do you think it would be easier in the long run to just have kids turn their phone in when they walk in the door? Or is it okay to allow backpack and not locker use?
Well, we've made the expectation that it goes in your locker. However, we do know that some students don't put it in their locker. And what we wanted to do, what the principals felt strongly about, was they didn't want to start the day with a power struggle.
Right.
And so they didn't want to start the day with, cough it up, let's see your phone kind of thing. And we were also worried about just the time and the logistics to try to manage all the phone collection and that sort of thing. And so we, you know, and our principal at People's Academy will be very clear. He feels strongly the reason that it works so effectively is because we put a lot of trust in the students. And we said, we trust you, you're gonna make the right decision and you're gonna put your phone away and we're not gonna see it. And I think that's gone a long way for
So
us.
then allowing the school to create that policy around, I mean, some might still
Yeah.
want to do it, but allowing that, it was key.
Yeah, and I think
Okay,
every school is a
that's
little
helpful.
different.
Yeah.
You might have a school that has had a lot of success with
Mhm.
pouches or with a different, you know, different method. And I think, you know, giving schools the autonomy to design what works for them, and especially when you add a cost to that, I think it's, you know, you wouldn't want to mandate something that people are gonna have to spend a lot of money on.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we know you have to get to, another